To paraphrase Thomas Carlyle, the history of the world is nothing but the history of great cities. And of course, the great stories that come out of these cities. We now have a panel of erudite writers who will take forward a discussion on urban writing. Usha KR has been writing fiction in English for over 3 decades now. She began by writing short stories, which were published in various Indian magazines and newspapers. Her short story, Sepia Tones, won the Katha Award for Creative Writing in English. Usha KR is the author of the novels Monkey Man, which was shortlisted for the DSE Prize, A Girl and a River, The Chosen, and Sojourn. Her novels have been listed for several awards, including the Commonwealth Writers' Prize and the Crossword Award. A Girl and a River won the Vodafone Crossword Award in 2007. Nirmala Lakshman is a journalist and director of the Hindu Group of Publications. She was joint editor of The Hindu and has held senior editorial positions at the newspaper for more than 3 decades. Nirmala founded and edited The Hindu Literary Review and conceptualized and created Young World, India's only children's newspaper supplement at the time. She launched and curated The Hindu's literary festival Lit for Life and initiated the annual prize for best fiction from The Hindu. Nirmala has a PhD in postmodern fiction from Madras University and a master's degree in English from the United States. She is the editor of an anthology of contemporary Indian journalism, Writing a Nation. Her latest book is Degree Coffee by the Yard. Kishwar Desai's debut novel, Witness the Night, won the prestigious Costa First Novel Award, and her first book was Darling G, based on the life of superstars Nargis and Sunil Dutt. Her controversial second novel, Origins of Love, has been published internationally by Simon & Schuster. She has recently released her third novel, The Sea of Innocence, and she's working on a book on cinema on Devika Rani and Himanshu Rai. Anita Nair is the best-selling author of The Better Man, Lady's Coupe, Mistress, and Lessons in Forgetting, and Cut Like Wound. Her books have been translated into over 30 languages around the world. Her new novel, Idris, will be published in November of this year. And moderating the session is Lavanya Sankaran. Her debut novel, The Hope Factory, was selected by Amazon UK as a top pick and awarded rave reviews worldwide. Her first book, The Red Carpet, a critically acclaimed short story collection, spent 2 years on the bestseller lists. Lavanya sponsors an annual writing fellowship at the Sangam Writers Residency to encourage new writers in India. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll request Madam Lavanya Sankaran to take over the session.
Hello. Yellow. Perfect. Now we're in business. What a great pleasure today to have these 4 fantastic writers talk about their craft. We are looking at the topic today of writing in an urban setting. When you introduce a city into your book, or when you set your writing in a book in a city, then the city does something amazing. It immediately becomes one of the characters in your writing. And much like any other character you talk about, it is a living, breathing entity. It's going to change. And then you as a writer have a real role to kind of handle it very responsibly and in a very interesting fashion. So we're going to talk about that today. Nirmala, let's start with you. You have the only non-fiction book on the panel today. And in your book, Degree Coffee by the Yard, Madras or Chennai, based on where you approach it, is the character of your book. So you describe it as a biography of a city, which is such a huge task. For a city of millions of people and years of history, how do you decide what the prime story is going to be? How do you decide what you are going to include and what you're going to exclude?
Let me first of all say that It's a great privilege to be with such eminent writers, and it's very nerve-wracking to be the only non-fiction person here. But I guess that, as the conversation flows, I will obviously pick up some things from what you all say and take it from there. And in that same tone, let me tell you that this whole sense of biography came from my editor and publisher, David Davidar, who had commissioned a series of books, city books, with a very specific intent of wanting an impressionistic view of a city from someone who's, within quotes, a native of the city. So that was a good starting point for me. And I think the city kind of became larger than life in my own eyes, though I've lived there all my life and everything was familiar. But it was also strange having to look at it from an objective point of view and go out to find. Actually, I found the biography of the city. There have been worthy people before me and still, other contemporaries who have done a lot of recording of Madras or Chennai, whatever you like to call it. And they have done detailed histories of, the city, as it grew, its administration, its architecture, and its people. So I thought it's best not to dwell too much on what went before and just to start from my own point of view. And I believe now that just as in fiction you give rise to individual voices that may or may not be modeled on real life, I believe that even in a biography, so-called biography, you can take the liberty of finding that individual voice. And my voice is really the voice of the multiple people I spoke to, which again made up the city, in my view.
Yes, so this is not just a story of Madras, it is also a story of your Madras.
Yes, exactly, yeah.
I know that the Hindu has played a huge role in the life of Chennai. And you note I keep switching between Madras and Chennai. How much of that influenced your writing? How much of the resources you used came from family sources? And how much were external to you?
I think I was very self-conscious about that, Lavanya. I didn't want to, though the Hindu is a big part of the story of Madras, which later became Chennai, I wanted to kind of keep a distance from that because, from the sheer reason of overdoing it. So I kind of held myself back. There are a lot more stories that came from the Hindu. I could have used the Hindu's resources a lot more. But I kind of refrained because that's not the only story. There are multiple other sources and other institutions that have made the city what it is. While the Hindu is a very important and integral part of Chennai and Madras, I thought that it's just one of the larger players. So I had to kind of be objective and keep a little distance from that.
So you didn't want it to be the Hindu book of Chennai?
No, right. Hopefully it's not.
No, I don't think so at all. I think you cover many different points of view, and we're going to come back to that in a bit. Anita, your last book, Cut Like Wound, you took us into a different world of Anita Nair writing, which is you went into crime fiction. And you gave us the stunning protagonist, Bore Gowda, police inspector after my own heart. And furthermore, you set the book in Bangalore, but not necessarily the Bangalore that everyone experiences. And I'm using the word everyone. I'd like to do inverted commas here because in a city of 7 million or 8 million, not everyone is going to experience the same city anyway. But you specifically take us into the world of the transgendered. And it is in that world that a crime nests. And in that world, you send Bore Gowda. So my question to you is, what made you choose the transgendered community as a locus for the crime?
Well, you see, I began off wanting to write a crime novel because the first thing that happened to me, the genesis of this novel, was that I had this vision in my mind of a transgender person. So having had this image in my mind, I didn't know what to do with this person. How was I going to fit this person into a novel which would be based, generally I write about suburban India. And transgenders, as a rule, don't have such a decided presence in suburban India. They're generally people who you see in the fringes of any city. So it meant that I had to write an urban novel. And again, the kind of literary work that I'd been doing until now, I thought writing about a transgender person would be precious. So I said I would just go away from that and plant this person in a crime novel, because also with a crime novel, it allows me to make social commentary, which I can't do in a literary novel. It again gets too precious. I'm using this word again and again simply because to kind of drive home the point that I didn't want contrived writing here. So in a crime novel, a transgender has a very easy place. There's absolutely nothing contrived about it. And I chose, which is why I chose the Shivaji Nagar area, primarily because for everybody who lives in Bangalore, all of us consider the Shivaji Nagar area as a whole new city on its own. We don't know much about it. But because I lived in the cantonment area, and for whatever reason, every time I had to drive, even to MG Road, I had to drive past Shivaji Nagar. So I had this, I would say, fleeting glimpse of Shivaji Nagar on a daily basis. And everything that I saw was different. Every day I would go by the same street, but every day I had a different vision of it. And it so happened that during these drives every day, I'd been watching one transgender person sit there, and I saw how this person had grown older, because they have something called a mother house, which is where transgenders go back to. And this person probably was the mother, is a mother now, but at that point was one of those people you see out on the streets at traffic lights, etc. And I'd seen how this person aged. And, so it got me thinking and all these things. And I said, okay, Shivaji Nagar has to be the place that I write about. And the transgender community, now that I've decided that I want to write about them, let me write about it at length rather than just kind of dabble and go away. So that was how that happened.
I would like to know which came first, your decision to use Bangalore/Shivaji Nagar or to go with the transgender community. It sounds like transgender community engaged you before the location. Is that right?
Absolutely. And the thing is, I have this theory that I will only write about what I'm familiar with. So all these years, I've been writing about Kerala because that is one territory that is home for me.
Yes.
I've written about Chennai because I grew up in Chennai. I've lived in Bangalore for 22 years now, but it took me this long to actually have the courage to write about Chennai. Write about Bangalore. And then again, it had to be a Bangalore that I'm familiar with. I couldn't write about Malleshwaram. I couldn't write about JP Nagar or Electronic City or so on. But since the transgender community was the first point of arrival for me within my novel, the next thing was where do these people live? Where do they stay? Where are the mother houses? And inevitably it led me towards the Hennur zone and Shivaji Nagar.
Yes. So how much of research did you do for this?
Oh, absolutely. I think 100% of this novel is based on research because I wouldn't be able to write otherwise. You see, also there's one part of me that has always laughed at the way police procedurals have been shown on television or in cinema.
Yeah.
And I've always wondered, how much of it is real? So if I were to write a crime novel, then everything about it, not just the police procedurals, but also the part of the transgenders, everything, Shivaji Nagar homes, what goes into a corporator's living room, what happens there, everything I had to know firsthand. Unfortunately, I had the right contacts to be able to kind of source this information.
So clearly you worked with policemen on police procedural. You entered the transgender community how? Do you want to share something about your private life with us at this moment?
I don't dress up. I don't dress up. Well, actually, with that, I had to work with an NGO for that. And then most of it has also been based on observation. Because, you see, I thought it would be a little kind of rubbernecking if I were to go and say, tell me more about yourself. I couldn't do that. I just would have to kind of stand on the fringes and observe them.
Yes.
And then speak to an NGO who worked with them to find out a little more about what went on, etc.
Yeah.
And then the other aspect of it was one of the corporators who actually now is part of the Bangalore corporator list is someone who used to work for me. So now, of course, he's like...
You have an in.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So I knew what was going on in his house. And so every element of it that has come in is based on observation or experience and not on hearsay at all.
Yeah. So I think that's something that a lot of people discount in a writer's professional work, which is the importance of simple observation, of just standing there and seeing and picking up details that maybe nobody else ever will, even if they stare at the same scene, right? Now, Usha, in your book, Monkey Man, her book is set in Bangalore, and in it she has her principal characters live in Ammanagudi Street, and their lives and the intersection of their lives occurs with the appearance of a strange monkey-like creature. And as she takes us through their lives, we get to experience the many layers of the city and how it is changing. Now, it's a very interesting device, fictional device, to locate your characters in a street or in a building or in the same neighborhood. And it's something that works very well for urban settings because it allows you right away to capture the excitement of a city, which is in a particular building, in a city, you can have strangers living and their lives intersecting in a way that you wouldn't if they were in a village where possibly everyone has lived in in the same neighborhood going back generations. So the surprise factor is possible in a city using a street or a neighborhood as a fictional device. So one of the interesting things you do in your book is you give different professions to your principal characters. You've got a college professor, you've got a secretary to a scientist, you've got a call center worker, an office boy, and an RJ. So obviously in their lives we get to see different segments of the city right there as they all live. So my question to you is, what other professions did you consider? How did you come upon this final list? Were there other professions you considered and discarded? Other characters you might have considered and discarded? Could you talk about that?
It's very difficult to say how, for any writer, to say how you zeroed in on the final product. But as you just said, writers, it is important for people to observe. And while work of fiction, this particular work of fiction is about 4 individual lives, it is also played out against a canvas, which, to my mind, Bangalore is the pin-up city for the changes that the country has experienced socially, economically, politically over the past 4 decades. So the question actually, the literary question is, how do you make the general and the particular intersect? So for one, I had a character, that is the college professor, who was an old-time Bangalorean and who belongs to, the generation of, the present generation is one, I would say, where everything is available. So he grows up in the 70s where, to use a shorthand, the license Raj generation.
Deprivation.
Where, yes, of frugality, not having enough, where ice cream is a treat. He comes from that background where it is second nature to be careful. And then you have, I have had another character who is between the crossroads of, social identity. Her parents come from 2 different communities. So how does the social angle play out? You see, multiculturalism is a very big theme. When you, as a reader, you read a lot of books set in somewhere in the West. All of us read Western writers a lot. So you have Indians in the US, and multiculturalism is a very big theme. And I thought to myself, it is right here in our backyard. How would I think about it? How does it play out in my city, in the lives of people who are closer to me? So my character, Neela, was a result of that line of speculation. Then again, while...
and she's the secretary to...
Yes, she's the
scientist.
secretary to the scientist.
And not a very nice person.
But my sympathies personally are with her the most of all the characters. And then you see, Bangalore is also seen as a city of opportunity for people who are not, for characters or for young people who aren't weighed down by the baggage of the past, this frugal background, or they see it as a city of immense opportunity.
Yes.
You have, for instance, in the second year of this literary festival, here we are in Electronic City, which is the hub of IT. And it is something that you cannot close your eyes to, because this has put Bangalore on the map. Bangalore has become a verb because of the presence of IT. And it provides a whole canvas of opportunity for different skills. You may be highly educated, and you may not have very many skills, but still you have a future. And the other two characters, the RJ and the girl who works in the call center, one thing that struck me was, how sassy the new generation is. They aren't weighed down by the past, their expectations. The world is open. It is just up to them to open up a fist that is closed. So equal opportunity India is something that the new generation seems to kind of embrace, take for granted. So these were the things that were, the larger picture. At the same time, there are individual lives. I had to think about how people live, which I think is a question that all writers ask themselves. First, you see these tremendous changes that are there in the background. I mean, you hear newspapers talking about globalization and privatization and the ITES. These are acronyms that we live with. And at the same time, there are people, and they are affected in many different ways. They themselves may not know it. And this dichotomy and the way these two things cross, Bangalore to me was the perfect canvas to explore this conundrum, this dilemma. And at the same time, it occurred to me that, there is no perfect, realistic or solid metaphor to represent this, or an object. There is no, perfect objective correlative. So I thought this has to be a case where maybe the dreams of people, their aspirations, their fears, the fact that they don't have control over the way the world is changing, or they don't like the things that are happening, or the fact that there is an immense possibility out there and it is just up to them to go and grab it. Is it possible that this sets up some kind of a life of its own? The city as something that grows, a chimera, a creature that has a life of its own, irrespective of its residents.
So does the monkey man then represent that chimera in a way?
Yes.
Is that a metaphor for the changes and the stresses and the opportunities that a city like Bangalore provides?
Yes, it could very well be that. But at the same time, around this time, all over in the newspaper, there was a spate of reports on the monkey man. Yes. There seemed to be an actual creature who was there in Delhi and who was spotted, different avatars of that creature was spotted all over India. And there were reports of a ball in the sky, and then there was a munochwa in the rural parts of North India. So this suggested several possibilities to me, and the result was my novel Monkey Man.
Wonderful. We're going to again come back to all of you with more questions, but now let's talk to Kishwar. So here's the thing that good writing does, and good crime writing does this, has this quality that is quite delicious, because crime fiction takes a place that you know very well and then flips it and makes you look at the underbelly of the same place. Now, Goa for me and for most of us here translates into very specific things. It's a holiday destination, it's beach, it's sand, it's beer, it's king prawns, it's shopping in flea markets, and usually is a break from our everyday life. Now, Kishwar takes the same setting, that Goa, and she sends her key investigator, Simran Singh, in her book, The Sea of Innocence, which is her newest book in the series, And she takes Simran on holiday to Goa, and there is Simran sitting on the beach, doing all the things that all of us normally do, when suddenly she does the one thing we don't, which is she gets sucked into a crime. And it's a fairly horrific crime that involves the rape and abduction of young girls. Now, Kishwar, this is a hugely topical subject in India right now. So I want to talk to you about, what led you to it, and also why you chose Goa as your setting. And I have to kind of qualify, we all know Goa to be a whole linked series of towns, but there is also the concept of Goa in our minds, which is, I think, in huge part what you'd also talk about.
Yeah. Thank you, Lavanya, and it's great to be here at the Bangalore Lit Fest, and thank you all of you there to be listening to us patiently on a hot summer afternoon. The reason that I am writing this particular book series, is also to indulge in a bit of myth busting. What we're discussing today is the urban spaces in which all of us live. And very often we live in them quite not knowing that there are things which are going on. And as we've recently discovered, there has been a lot of violence which has been happening in these cities quietly, a lot of times unnoticed, recently coming out much more in the media, creating a sort of a dangerous zone and dangerous spaces that we considered very safe. So like you, when I was growing up in, say, the first novel in the series that I took up, which was a novel which was set in Jalandhar, I actually grew up in Jalandhar, and which is what you can call a small town India, really, in many ways. I thought this was a very safe zone, and, nothing ever goes wrong in the lives of girls who grew up in Jalandhar. But when I started writing the first book in this particular series, which deals with gender violence, which is taking place, and I started going deeper into the issue of female feticide and infanticide, I realized that the first myth we have to uncover is that a lot of this is happening in some rural area out there. Actually, that's quite incorrect. It's happening in families which are very well placed. And families that sometimes look very respectable are also indulging in female feticide, infanticide, and trying to get rid of their children, their baby girls, one way or the other. So the first thing, my first novel, when I started exploring the safe zone of Jalandhar, and I started going beyond what I thought was the obvious and looking at what was the not so obvious, there was also a tripping point here, because a lot of people in my family, for example, got very upset with me because they said that I had turned a city or a small town that they thought was fantastic into a dangerous zone, and what would people say? I mean, suddenly Jalandhar became not as respectable as they thought it was. But all I was trying to do through that crime novel was really make us go into those areas in cities that we don't dare to look at. So similarly, in the Sea of Innocence, I do spend a lot of time in Goa, and like you, I love the king prawns. I love lounging on the beaches, and it's absolutely fine. But there was a case that I had looked at about 5 years ago when I was looking at this gender series that I was working on, and that was the Scarlet Keeling case, which brought to light that when even in what you consider to be, feel-good places, everybody's partying, everybody's having a great time and things like that, actually, there is a girl who was raped with, in full public knowledge. Nothing happened, even though it was a very high-profile case. It was an internationally reported case. Every inch of Goa was probably covered by journalists, and yet they could not really pinpoint that dark zone into which this girl disappeared. So I think those kind of things for a novelist are very important, because we have to take you where normal life will not take you. We have to cross those barriers. We have to break into your minds and probably take you to zones that you haven't been before, because otherwise, what's the point of writing? What's the point of just creating areas that you're already familiar with? I want to make you uncomfortable. that was what I want to do through these books. I want to add discomfiture to your knowledge of a city or a zone that you might know extremely well and make you a little nervous about it, because it's very important you begin to look at these areas again, especially in India today, where there is a lot of violence going on against women, and it is all happening around us. We just have to wake up. We have to open our eyes. So I think that's where the Sea of Innocence emerged from, with when I read about Scarlett Keeling's case. And then, of course, once I started researching, and I was horrified that there is so much violence which is just going on all the time in cities in India, and violence that we just take for granted. Even the killing of baby girls is murder that goes unpunished, and yet we think this is perfectly fine. This is part of our tradition. It's been happening through the years, so let's forget it. So I think the job of a novelist is also to present to you the same city, maybe perhaps the way you know it, but then to take you inside. And I agree with Anita to the point that I also deal with cities. All the cities that I have described in my 3 novels are cities that I have lived in and have experienced, so that I can give you the familiar structures and I can describe the places, but then I can take you into those dark zones that I know exist. And a lot of the books I work on, all the books that I do are research-based. So I do a lot of unpeeling of the onions, sort of taking off the layers and then sort of going into that dark heart, which is very unsettling for me also as a novelist, Perhaps it helps me because I've been a journalist, and when you're a journalist, you're reporting just the facts, You don't actually become subjective. You don't actually go and into the deep tunnels sometimes, and that's where you can do, that's what you can do as a novelist, is actually go into the minds of people and begin to understand what is the urban situation, what is the urban man doing, what is the urban woman doing, and why is there this scary place that is now being created within what we thought was safe zones. I just want to add one more point to your point of what you said, that, probably your vision of Goa is a little changed. I was doing my book launch in Goa just about a month and a half ago. And somebody in the audience said exactly what you said. And they said, you're making Goa sound very dangerous. She was a girl from Mumbai. And it just slipped out. At that point, I told her, I said, look, this can happen anywhere. It can happen in Mumbai. Don't think Mumbai is safe. And it was horrible because within a week, the gang rape happened, the Shakti Mills gang rape happened, and she emailed me to say, yes, you were right. We have to look at all these areas again. It's not that, the safety zones are things that we have to re-examine.
Yes. So this is a very interesting point that both Anita and Kishwar, both of you have raised, which is you are taking crime fiction, and most people think of crime fiction as entertainment, as genre fiction, as escapist fiction, the kind of thing that they turn to at the end of the day to get sort of a little cheap thrill out of. But you're actually using them for very different things. Yes, you are entertaining, but you're also using them to espouse special causes and things of interest to you. So Anita, would you like to talk a little bit more of that? Just pick up on where Kishwar left in terms of the issues that you might be looking at Cut Like Wound that really disturbed you and that you wanted to kind of bring attention to, if any.
I think, there were several things that I wanted to talk about without getting into one specific issue here. So there was, for instance, the extent of corruption that exists in, I'm not even going to point fingers at other cities, but just Bangalore. What happens in the Bangalore Corporation? All of us know what happens. And so I had my corporator who represented the acme of that corruption. I had...
This is your pet corporator who worked for you?
Yes, my pet corporator.
Wonderful.
Yes. And then there was, of course, the transgender community, which I wanted to talk about. And there was also some element of celebration of Shivaji Nagar, which is a zone in Bangalore that I love. I completely love that area. Because I think that, when I travel, wherever I travel, I always look for marketplaces. I enjoy markets. And this is a market area which is not just interesting in terms of variety, but also in the kind of layers that you find, the texture that you find, the kind of people who come there. You have such a mixture of people there. You find all kinds. And the interesting thing about Shivaji Nagar, of course, is that it's this highly sensitive zone because of the various religions there. I mean, you have a very dominant Muslim community there, but you have Bangalore's only basilica situated there as well.
Yes.
And then you have countless Tamilian temples there. So there's this beautiful amalgamation of cultures that happens there, so which as a writer is very exciting for me to write about. And that is again, and generally everybody dismisses Shivaji Nagar as this very dangerous territory. It's like, oh, I wouldn't go there after 8 o'clock in the night, it's not safe, etc. But what I have discovered through my own research and my late night jaunts there, it's probably the safest place in Bangalore. Because
what makes it so? And tell us about your late night joints.
Well, this was
jaunts. Rather.
So
that was totally a slip that was not intended.
Well, you see, one of the things that I have in the book is that it's built around the Ramzan period. So the book begins with the first day of Ramzan and ends on September 8th, which is St. Mary's Feast Day, and which is a huge festival there in Shivaji Nagar area because the basilica have their procession and so on. And what I wanted to do, and I'd heard about this Ramzan market that pops up during Ramzan time, and the market comes alive only at 10:30 in the night, and it goes on till about 3 o'clock in the morning. So I was told that I should go there and take a look at it, and only then I'm going to really get the flavor of what it is like. So I had to find somebody who would go with me. And I kept asking him, I said, is it all right? Is it safe? And I know my family were not very pleased. My driver was very unhappy because he had to drive me there. And but I thought, and the boy who went with me, he'd organized for a couple of his friends also to go with me. And it was amazing because it was like stepping into another world, another time zone completely. And what I noticed was that it was packed with people, all the people stepping out after their, the last fast and the last whatever, and buying things because they buy, a lot of sales happen at that point, and people are buying for weddings that probably will happen 6 months down the line, but they can buy all the things that they need. And there were lots of men, lots of women, children. And the interesting thing, I was just thinking, if it was if it was Brigade Road, for instance, which all of us think is very, civilized and so on, you know that you're going to get jostled, you know that somebody is going to say something to you, and you're going to hear all kinds of snide comments, maybe, even not so pleasant ones. But here, it was the safest place, all that crowd, not a single man touching you, not a single man kind of, doing anything unsavory. And then I asked this boy with me, Nasser, and he said, ma'am, if you just make a little noise, you can be sure that the entire crowd out here will just pounce on him and beat him to pulp. So they are very careful. Nobody's going to do anything. And that actually, I love, made you not worry about any bodily harm and just look around and observe things and see how people were behaving and what they were doing. They were eating. Everybody was having a grand time. And because, in the morning they would go back into the fast and so on. So this is a time they're actually filling in, and the food was fantastic. So it was another world which I, having lived in Bangalore all these years, I had never experienced. And it was something that I had always, because the moment I mentioned this to anybody, they said, oh, you're going to Shivaji Nagar at that point? Are you out of your mind? And I was glad I did that because it showed me something about this city, which I have always thought as the dark, unsavory part of the city. But this was probably one of the nicest experiences of my life.
Fantastic. So both of you are raising again a topic which I want to look at, which is the danger of being a writer is often that we have to venture emotionally, physically, mentally into spaces that make other people uncomfortable. And very often they make people very close to us uncomfortable.
And yourself too. I mean,
Of course.
you also get
Of course.
extremely, uncomfortable with
Yes.
some of the things you have to write.
Yes,
and describe.
yes. So this is very much, of course, a personal journey, but we do, because we are social animals and we live and we love, and even if we hate and we dislike, we are still surrounded by people. We have to deal with their opinion. Usha, you're a Bangalore product, or at any rate, you've lived here many years. Are you from Bangalore to begin with?
Yes.
So when you sit and write a very honest account of a Bangalore existence, do you face the most resistance from yourself or from others? I mean, how does that process work for you? How important is it?
Actually, it depends on, the nature of the work that you are doing. If it is an imaginative reconstruction, there are ways in which, see, for one, there's a lot of research that goes into every novel. And much depends upon the tools that the writer uses to reinvent and reconfigure this material into a literary artifact. Here you have, you aren't just dealing with raw material or things as they happened. That would be reportage. That would be a journalist's job. A writer reconstructs that material in very many imaginative ways. You may use literary devices. They may not be straightforward. You may use different ways of putting things across. You may make stories out of personal narratives which people have told you, and use little bits and pieces, which cannot directly be related to people and to individuals. Now, having said that, yes, if your family members or people have a certain idea about you and a certain a comfort zone, and then they find that your writing shows you up to be a very different kind of person than you are, than you come across to them as, say, a daughter or a wife or a mother, it makes them uncomfortable. But I think writers have to be true to what they believe, and your basically, if you're true to yourself and to your vocation or what you are doing. I don't want to sound very bombastic about this. But if you really believe that what you are doing is right, it is worthwhile, and that is what you have to do, you get over it. And people who have writers in their family, it's a lesson to them to not take what writers say personally and seriously.
Yes, because that is the risk of writing about cities, which is when you write about a city, you are sure to have someone from that city come up to you and go, "Excuse me? This is not my city. What are you even talking about?" Right? Now, Nirmala, when you are describing Chennai, again, in your book, you pick and select. You've talked about it being somewhat from your personal experience of the city. But in reading the book, it's also a very positive view of Chennai. You do talk about some of the issues, but this is not someone who hates Chennai. This is not someone who has had nothing but a series of bad experiences and wants to get back at the city. So how do you consciously make that choice? Did any part of the book make you uncomfortable to write?
Actually, I had to my editor kept telling me, lose the journalist in you. And because several times, is it okay? Is it working? Several times I found that when I interviewed people, I had to look at the other side, ask, what was the other side of things. And like Kishwar said, we had to explore the dark side of the city as well. I spent several days with a fisherman whom I've quoted in the book. And for him, even the notion of the city was strange. He said, "What is this city to me?" And he pointed to the bus stop at the edge of the beach and said, "That's where my life ends."
So I thought that was one of the most stunning quotes from the book, that for someone who's lived in Chennai all his life, his Chennai is Marina Beach.
Yeah, exactly.
Phenomenal. Yeah.
And then further, there are people who've been displaced. And just like Usha and Anita and Kishwar have all spoken about, there are dark places in a city that people don't want to go to. And as a journalist, I felt that, I had the help of a lot of young journalists from the Hindu who kind of gave me their sources. And did several exploratory trips to, like Shivaji Nagar, there's a Kannagi Nagar in Chennai, where all the fishermen have been transplanted by force by the government and promised all sorts of things. And there they have, I mean, it's just simply horrific. Everyone who's had experience of, deprived sections of cities know how it can be. And apart from just the physical infrastructure falling and collapsing, these people have been sort of drawn into a web of violence and gang warfare, so to speak. And yet the hope in that was, young girls coming up and saying, first they said, "Madam, are you from the government? We've had a lot of people coming and promising things and nobody's done anything." I said, "I'm very sorry, I'm just writing a book." They said, "This is not even for a newspaper." I said, "No, this is not for a newspaper, but we'll see what we can, I'll try and put it out and see if someone will come." And they said, "We are fed up. We want an education. We want to move out of the squalor. We want a life." So I think as a journalist, I had to be faithful to that. And I think some of my misgivings are that I didn't do enough of that in my portrayal of Chennai. I wish I could have done more. And in fact, even the little bit that I did do, a couple of the older chroniclers of Chennai did tell me, "Why did you dwell so much on that? There's so much that is beautiful about Chennai. You could have told some quirky stories about some Englishmen." I mean, I did do one or two of those. And also talk about, Shivaji Ganeshan or, somebody who's an artist. Or
keep it pleasant.
Keep it pleasant. Yes. And I said, that's not the truth. So, when you have to tell the truth, however uncomfortable, you have to go into it. My only regret is that the space didn't permit me to do more. And I'm hoping to address it at some point in the future.
Are we thinking of another book on Chennai? Many books?
Maybe a couple of years down the road.
That's great. Now, I have many more questions for this panel, but how much of time? Are we running out of time? Okay, I'm told that I have time for question answers. I'm going to ask one more question before I turn it over to the audience, which is, when we write about cities, do each of you, and I'm going to ask each of you to handle this in turn, how much time do you need distance from the city you're writing about? Do you need to get away from the space, or can you do it in that space? Could each of you just do a run on? Kishwar, why don't you start and we'll head down to Nirmala.
Okay, I suppose you want quick answers. So,
just a little bit on your own internal writing technique of how you approach city.
I don't really need distance. In fact, if I have too much distance, then I find I don't get engaged. And each of my cities is like a character in the book, because a lot of what is happening is in the urban space. And so it's very important for me that the city is the way I imagine it. So I don't allow the distance to really grow too much. The city is something that I experience almost physically, even though I might be sitting on my desk. But I do try and describe areas in it. So all the cities that I've covered, whether it be a stretch of Goa, which is not really a city, as you said, but a state, whether it is London, whether it is Delhi, whether it is Gurgaon, areas of Gurgaon, or Jalandhar, all of these are places I have visited myself. So I think for me, that is very important, because my books are, as you pointed out, even though they're fiction, they are based in reality. And I don't want the reader to ever disengage so much that they start thinking, "Oh, this is not happening in the real world," or "It's happening in some other fantasy zone," or something like that, or "She's making it up." I want them to constantly have the feeling that it's happening here and now.
Yeah. So you didn't write about sunny Goa while shivering in London? You were sitting on
No, I was actually right there in Goa. And every time I needed to cross-check something, I would just run across to Anjana, or I would, drive down to a particular space. We actually went and ate in the shacks that I have described. Fantastic. And I walked on those beaches. Everything is felt real and explored.
Thank you. Usha?
Yes, experience it at one level.
Yeah.
But after that, you need a gestation period. You need a contemplative distance from the material that you're looking at. So
does it help to get away? Do you get away and write anywhere
maybe
else?
not physically.
Yeah.
I work best in familiar surroundings, but when there are no demands made on my time. And silence, where it's silent. So actually, I think I'd be more comfortable writing about anywhere in familiar surroundings, where when you get away from what you are familiar with, your city, there is a certain anxiety associated with being away from familiar ground, being away from home. So I have to write in the place that I'm most comfortable in, where I don't have to think about being somewhere else. But the distance, you need time to churn things over in your mind and then write about it.
So routine and the gift of silence helps your
Yes,
words.
yes.
Anita, did you write about Bangalore in Kerala?
I don't know. I can't remember where I wrote about Bangalore.
Oh, no. We want a reply.
Well,
did you write it in
no, I
Goa?
can- No,
Because
no,
this
no,
seems
no. I
very-
can write anywhere. It doesn't matter to me. Okay, so it really doesn't matter to me. All I do need is that I still write longhand, so I just need the pen that I write with. So if I have that and a bottle of ink, I can write anywhere. It doesn't matter to me.
And paper, presumably.
Presumably, yes.
So you write your books on the road, in the city, in your house?
Anywhere, it doesn't matter to me.
You don't have a preferred spot?
No, I mean,
Yeah.
in my home,
Yeah.
I do have I have a library
Yeah.
where I could sit down and write. But very often I end up sitting at the dining table or sitting outside. Or sometimes I'm trying to watch a film when I'm writing. So
Really?
yeah. So
Stephen King used to watch games while he wrote, so maybe this is something worth trying. Yeah, I'm picking up ideas here. So, Nirmala, what about you?
I think music helps a lot. I mean, it shouldn't be something that should be gentle and in the background.
Yeah.
And like Usha, I take breaks from writing within the same space often, not going away. I find that reading when you're traveling helps a lot. You go back to your topic fresh and to your city fresh.
Yes.
And you get the details from that. But I think you have to be in that physical space, especially because this was a book on Chennai. And I had to keep, running out and meeting people and going back to seeing that building again.
Yeah.
Just the physical description of it. I would see it when I was going on a drive or a walk. But I went back to write about it. I had to go back and see it. So I had to be there. I think it's a practical thing more than anything.
A practical thing, yeah. Well, thank you all so much. Let me open it out to questions, if any. Yes, lady in the white with polka dots. There.
So,
Sir, could you step a little to the left? I'm afraid we can't see you very well.
Of course.
You can? Okay, we're good, thanks.
Right. So, I haven't read any of your books, I'm sorry. Pardon my ignorance. But why is it that the modern detective story is restricting itself to the urban scape? I mean, is it because the target audience is basically an urban populace? Or is it because we take for granted that these kind of horrors are rampant in the villages of India?
Okay. Can I just say two things, before I, really answer the question? Because you're talking in a more general space. You haven't read my book, so you have no idea how I've dealt with it. And the reason that we are using the urban space is definitely nothing to do with the fact that, the readership is in urban India or urban areas all over the world. As I said, I assume you're talking about all detective stories that are being written in today's age. I think all stories choose their locations, because if you have a narrative, there is a particular kind of plot which just works better maybe in an urban space. So I can say that for probably all writers. But as far as I'm concerned, the reason why I've deliberately chosen the urban space is because I wanted to break some myths. As I said right in the beginning, that I did want to break particularly the myth that in my first book, that female feticide and infanticide only happens in remote villages. I wanted to bring it home to the reader that these are issues which are happening in urban India, in elite homes, and these are crimes that are going unpunished, and we must do more to look upon them as urban crimes as well. And indeed, when the census came out of 2011, and we saw that there was such a drastic drop in the number of girls vis-a-vis number of boys. As you know, there are 914 girls for every 1,000 boys. So, it showed us that this was a crime which was fairly rampant, and it wasn't rampant only in rural India, which of course it is. It is also rampant, as the figure showed, in urban India. So it was very much part of the plot that I was working on. I set my book in Punjab, in urban India, in small town Punjab, in Jalandhar, because that was very key to my plot. I honestly, I can tell you, and my publisher is sitting right there, I had no idea that this book would ever get published. I didn't think anyone would take a book dealing with female feticide and fanticide seriously. But not only did she publish it, she was also kind enough to look at the other novels which came as a sequence. I was very much an accidental crime author. I had no hope for my first book, but fortunately it did well, and I went on to write others.
Ma'am, I'm Anvita. Yeah,
Hi, go ahead.
yeah.
We can hear you.
So, my question to Anita is that, my question to Anita is, when you are writing difficult parts of your book, does it disturb you? Does it affect your day-to-day life? How do you deal with it?
See, when I'm writing the difficult parts of any novel that I'm working on, I think it seeps into me. You know, I'm quite devastated. If I've written a horrific scene, the question that I ask myself after writing it is, A, where is it coming from within me? So obviously that I have this, you know, horribly dark latent side to me, which is what is coming out when I'm writing. So that affects me when I think about it. Sometimes if I've written an emotionally charged scene, then after writing it, I'm completely devoid of all emotion for some time. Then I kind of go into this very frozen state of mind where I'm not able to engage with my family or my friends as a normal human being. I just want to be left alone. So to that extent, all the difficult parts of writing, I mean, you know, I have to pay for it. I have to pay for writing a scene as realistically as possible.
Anyone else who has a question here?
Oh, is there another one? Because if there isn't, I have one.
I don't think so. You can continue.
Okay. So this is a very interesting issue that has come up, which is, as writers, we are often living the worlds of our characters and the situations in our book. And what then are our recovery mechanisms? You know, what do we do when we have written something that's completely emotionally draining? I mean, I think an ideal, life of a writer is something that where the people in our life sense where we are and allow us to be. And often that isn't the case. So what recovery mechanisms do each of you have after a really hard day's writing? Can you talk about that a little bit?
To begin with, I write my books very differently to what I can gather the others write. I write with great intensity and I don't take breaks. So what happens is that when I'm in a book, I just write non-stop. It could be a month, it could be 2 months, but I don't do anything else. I wake up in the morning, I live with my characters, and I carry on like that till midnight, or however long it takes. And usually, therefore, I write my books fairly fast, because when I'm in that plot and I'm living with those characters, they are just talking to me constantly, so I don't have time for anything else around me. I deal with the day-to-day, whatever one has to do, but I'm totally in it. And once the book is written, it is written. So normally I've done the whole book with the difficult parts, with the happy parts, with whatever it is, but it is all done. So my recovery is to start thinking of the next book. I actually take very few breaks in between because I think I just enjoy the act of writing so much. And I don't really believe in writer's block. I think it's work like every other work that you have. So I'm sorry, my way of looking at it is completely different.
So you get energized by the writing process.
I just love writing and I just get bash on with it. I sort of get on to the next book and that's it. I mean, so that's my recovery pattern. I start thinking of the next plot. And each plot is so exciting, each book is so exciting that I just move on with the momentum.
Great. Usha, what about you?
I find I don't write for very long stretches of time in a day, but I find routine very soothing. A job which is in a different space, and but the thing is that is how you deal with the mechanics of it. The truth, of course, is that your characters are in your head all the time. Your unwritten book, the books that you hope to write in the future. Once a book is written, it's over. It's out of your head. But when you're thinking about a book, while the characters are there with you all the time, whether you like it or not, they are in your mind, and they're consuming your mental energy. So as an antidote to that, I hope to have my days to be when I'm writing as uneventful otherwise as possible.
Yes. So you can just stay in that writing zone.
Yes, stay in that writing zone in your head.
Yes.
But then you continue to do all the other things that is expected of you.
The things of life.
Yes, the things of life, and hopefully that it shouldn't take up too much of your time.
Yeah.
Or even very demanding of that mental energy. That is what I hope for. It doesn't work out like that all the time, but well, I've learned to live with it.
And do people in your life give you that space to go and be in your writing space, whether you're writing or not?
Well, as long as I attend to my other duties, yes. But no, and in a way it's good that if your family or the rest of the world doesn't treat you as something precious. Because writers have to tap into, if you're tapping into the real world, I think some kind of neutral space where you're not perceived as a writer is important, where you can be just another person. I mean, I've said writers should travel on buses. They should stand in queues and get insulted by clerks. I mean, that's what is going to give them among other things.
So the importance of just engaging with real life.
Yes.
Yes.
But on a quiet, at a very quiet level, not at a very high pitch. Hopefully it's
so
just,
not at a disruptive
space.
Yeah.
The tanpura that plays in the background when the musician sings.
Yes.
Hopefully, that way.
Yeah. Lovely. What about you, Anita? Are there zones you need to cross every day, or are you allowed to be in your writing space? How do you recover?
No, I mean, I do have to. I mean, I have the rest of my life to deal with as being this, wife, mother, etc., all that. So all that has to be dealt with, on a daily basis. And I think for me, the only way I can kind of switch off from my writing is to exchange the reality of my writing into the reality of someone else's, which could be a film, mostly film, and the more silly it is, the better it is for me. Which is why I watch a lot of cinema, every language. I mean, Tamil, Malayalam, Hindi, English, 4 languages that I watch a film a day. So that is what I require to switch off and to, if I were to read a very interesting book, then that again, squeezes in my writing in a certain way, because it makes me think, brings in dimensions that I don't want to be thinking about at that point. But if I can watch a silly, vapid film, then my mind switches off, and all I'm doing is just kind of giggling or whatever I'm expected to do at that point of time while watching it. And I think the other thing that I do to switch off is that I do have quite a lot of friends, so just meeting them, talking to them, and listening to what they have to say rather than telling them about what I'm doing makes a difference for me, because it just kind of, I close my mind to what I'm writing about at that point. I close my mind to all the problems that I'm dealing with within that writing space, and I just kind of put aside my personality and just allow myself to be there and to listen to what's happening. That's about it.
Well, fantastic. I mean, I think movies, family, routine, work, these are so much better than the alcoholism that used to plague an earlier generation of writers. So, well, I think we have to end today. So thank you all so much on a fabulous discussion. I feel I could keep on all day discussing with you guys, but they're not going to let me. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Lavanya, for facilitating this conversation.